welcome to this all candidates meeting, your opportunity to hear from the people running locally in the October 21st federal election. My name is Jim Mason. It's my honor to serve as your Master of Ceremonies and moderator for this evening. I welcome you on behalf of the organizers and sponsors, the Whitchurch-Stouffville Public Library and the Whitchurch-Stouffville Chamber of Commerce. The folks in front of you want to be your next member of parliament here in this riding of Markham-Stouffville. To update you, all 6 candidates in the riding agreed to attend this evening. Conservative candidate Theodore Anthony informed organizers this morning he would not be here tonight, quote unquote, due to unforeseen circumstances. End of quote. We apologize for the last-minute venue change. The permit for the original venue, Stouffville District Secondary School, was canceled by the York Region School Board on Friday. That's as a result of job actions implemented by CUPE, educational support staff across Ontario. That brings us here to beautiful Spring Lakes. A few housekeeping items. The exits are on either side. You'll see them marked with the red signs in case of an emergency. Washrooms to your right, my left, down the hallway. And there are seats that were reserved but are now open. If anyone's at the back and wants to move up to get a better look and hear better, come on up, don't be shy. More thank yous to the candidates who have joined us here this evening. To Bob Lean and the entire crew here at Spring Lakes Golf Course for hosting us. To Whistle Radio for broadcasting this meeting live and recording it. It will be available on the Whistle website as a podcast, possibly as early as tomorrow, I understand. It'll also be rebroadcast at least 2 more times before Election Day. Thanks to Stouffville's own Most Excellent Productions for the staging and audio-visual tonight. To Sonia Torres and Dolores Trenadu for volunteering their time to be our timekeepers again this evening. To all of the students and other volunteers that are here tonight to help things run smoothly and to collect your questions for the candidates. A little more on that later. Here's our format. Each candidate first will have 3 minutes to introduce themselves and their platform. Following the introductions, the first series of questions will be asked. These questions were provided to the candidates in advance so they could prepare their answers. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. While that first series of questions is being answered, the audience will have the opportunity to write down questions that will be compiled and submitted for the second series of questions. We'll do our best to get to as many of those questions as possible this evening in the time allotted. The media will not be permitted to ask questions this evening. After the second series of questions, candidates will then be given 3 minutes each for closing remarks. The rules of the evening. Please allow each speaker to finish their point without interruption. Please, no heckling. Let's all be civil, fair, and polite. This is not the House of Commons. And this is not Twitter. Each speaker will be given an equal amount of time. Candidates drew lots in the side room shortly before 7 o'clock for the speaking and have agreed to this order. After each round, in fairness, we will switch up the order. At the front, Sonia and Dolores, who will act as our timekeepers, they'll raise their hand when there is 30 seconds left before a speaker's time is finished. They'll again raise a hand and wave when the speaker's time has elapsed. Speakers are asked to adhere to the time that they are given. Again, if you're standing at the back and you'd like a seat, we've got at least 25 seats here at the front, so come on down. If anyone in the audience has a question you'd like to submit, please raise your hand now. Volunteers will provide you with paper and pen to write down your questions. Please write clearly, keep your questions concise and general in nature. This is not the format for solving individual issues. Questions should be returned as quickly as possible to our volunteers, and we'll do our best to get to as many of those questions as possible in the time we have here at Spring Lakes tonight. So let's go. We're a little ahead of schedule. Each candidate will now have 3 minutes to introduce themselves. And our first speaker is Roy Long of the Green Party. Roy?
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Roy Long. I'm running for the Green Party. I've been coaching hockey in this neighborhood, this community, for the last 20 years. And all the kids I've met are the brightest kids I've ever seen. I truly believe they are the brightest kids in the entire country. And that's because the parents in this neighborhood are so committed, so involved. I'm at the rink at 7 in the morning, and I see all the parents. They show up through ice storms, through snowstorms, through anything. And then after, they take their kids to Kumon, to Mathnasium, because the parents in this neighborhood love their kids, they work so hard for their kids, and we have the brightest kids. And I want them to have a bright future. And that's why I've stepped up and joined the Green Party. I want these kids to have a bright future. Now, most of you know some of the doctors up here. And you probably don't know me, except I've been in the news a lot, also running Roy Long. So I've lived in the neighborhood for the last 30 years. I've raised 2 boys. They just finished college and university, so I know what it's like to pay for higher education. I want you to know 2 things about me. Number 1, I'm not a great speaker, but I'm a great listener. That's the one thing I do. When I'm at the hockey rink, when I'm at Walmart, when I'm at Longo's, I listen to people. I don't tell them what they need. I listen to what they tell me they need. So number 1, I'm a great listener. The other thing you should know about me is I'm average. By that, I mean I make the average income of anybody in this province. So I know what it's like when the transmission goes in your car and you have to sit down with your son and you say, "You're a great hockey player, but we just don't have the money this year." And he looks you in the eye and he says, "Dad, it's okay," but you know it's not. Or the shingles blow off your roof and you got to get a new roof and you got to talk to your wife and say, "We can't afford that family vacation this year." And she says, "It's okay," but you know it's not. I know the struggles that everybody in this room is having because I have them. When you make a lot of money, you don't have that feel. You know about it, but you don't feel it in your gut. So that's the 2 things I want you to know about me. I'm a great listener, and I'm average. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Our next speaker, Jeremy Lynn from the People's Party of Canada. Jeremy?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Jeremy Lin, not the basketball player. Born the same year and same date, but different month, so could have had a different destiny. Anyway, this is my first time running for politics, and I think I've only gotten actively engaged in about the last year or so. I know that a lot of young people have become very cynical about politics and are very disengaged. But I've realized in the last year that it's very important that we try our best to do stuff for our country and for our community. And as a result, I decided that I wanted to run. Our party wants to try to put Canadian interests and our nation's interests ahead of everything else. And I really believe in the idea of the party, which is why I'm running. So I've lived in Stouffville for 6 years, and I, like Roy, mostly work regular jobs. I'm not, upper class or upper middle class. I also understand what it's like to struggle financially, and also what it's like to be just an ordinary citizen. So I hope that, I know a lot of people may not have heard of our party before, or maybe you might have some preconceived notion from the media, etc. But I hope that you'll give me the opportunity tonight, hear me out. I thank you everyone for coming, because the weather today isn't the greatest, and I'm glad people came, because it's important that we vote. It's important that we don't take democracy for granted. It is one of the values of our country. It is one of the value that makes our country great, that we can decide who the ones who serve the community are. So thank you again.
Thank you, Jeremy. Next up, Hal Berman from the New Democratic Party.
Thank you. My name is Hal Berman, and I'm running for the NDP. It's a privilege to be here before you to share my party's vision for a better Canada. For decades, federal politics have been monopolized by two major parties with obviously some differences, but mostly too many similarities. And while things have changed, and sometimes for the better, more and more people feel like they're being left behind, while those who are connected, they get ahead. And I'm proud to stand with Jagmeet Singh and the New Democratic Party to say enough is enough. It's time for a party that put working Canadians first. It's time for a party that keeps its promises to Canadians and works for Canadians. And nowhere is the Liberal government's failure to do that more apparent than here in Markham Stouffville. Justin Trudeau promised to end first past the post, but he changed his mind when Canadians rejected a model that he favored because it would give his party huge majorities over and over. He abandoned electoral reform because the most democratic system, mixed member proportional representation, would mean he would have to share power with others and collaborate. If he had kept his promise, you wouldn't have to vote against people. You could vote for your favorite candidate, and you could vote for your favorite party. You wouldn't have to choose between Dr. Philpott and the NDP. You could have both, or whichever other one you want. Because of Trudeau's failure, now you're being scared into voting against a party you don't want, rather than a party that you do want. But imagine if it were not that way. Imagine that your vote in any riding could help bring a strong NDP team to Ottawa. Imagine in a system that made every single vote count. Imagine filling your prescriptions using your health card, not your credit card. Imagine being able to get the dental care that you need. Imagine having access to mental health care or addiction care for you or a loved one. Imagine being able to afford to live without making choices between food and rent. Imagine being able to afford tuition for yourself or your children. Imagine affordable childcare so that you could get back to work when you were ready. Imagine being part of a transition to a green economy, combating climate change with high-quality jobs. We don't have to imagine for much longer. We just need to trust ourselves and vote for something new. Real change can be very scary. But if we have the courage to take those steps, our children will have better lives. So please support Jagmeet Singh and my New Democratic Party. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hal. Our next speaker, independent candidate Jane Philpott.
Thank you, Mr. Mason, and good evening, fellow citizens, and good evening to my fellow candidates as well. My name is Jane Philpott, and I am happy to be running for re-election as an independent candidate. I have lived in Stouffville for 21 years. For the first 17 of those years, I served this community as a family doctor, and now for the past 4 years, I've been honored to be your Member of Parliament. Some of you may know that during that time, I served in 3 federal cabinet positions and had the privilege of working on files that are important to you, to help bring Syrian refugees to Canada, to legislate a balanced approach to medical assistance in dying, to negotiate a health accord that would provide new resources for mental health and home care, and to improve infrastructure so that we would increase access to clean drinking water for First Nations on reserve. I am now proud to be running as an independent candidate. And tonight I ask you not to underestimate what an independent Member of Parliament can do for Markham Stouffville. I became an independent Member of Parliament over a series of events because I stood up on a matter of principle. But in the process, I didn't lose my voice. I found my voice. In Ottawa, I learned that unfortunately, Members of Parliament are often told what to say and how to vote. As an independent member of Parliament, I am able to speak up freely on behalf of my constituents. In our conversations over the last number of years, you've told me you want to focus on a number of things. There are 6 top priorities I've heard from you: climate action, democratic reform, Indigenous reconciliation, pharmacare, housing affordability, and better transportation. I can work with you to address all of these issues, and being an independent doesn't mean that I'll be working alone. It means I'll be working with everyone to get things done. We need better collaboration in Ottawa, particularly on the hard files, like climate change, foreign policy, and responsible fiscal management. You can count on me to work hard for you, and it would be my great honor to continue to represent you as a strong, independent voice in Ottawa. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Jane. Our final candidate from the Liberal Party, Helena Jazyk.
Good evening, everyone, and I'm just delighted to be here this evening so we can share some ideas across this table and, of course, with your questions when you pose them later. I've had the honor over the last 10 years to serve as your provincial member of Parliament for the people here in Whitchurch Stouffville and also Markham, and my riding was Oak Ridges Markham, so it also included King Township and a large part of Richmond Hill. And during that time, I listened to my constituents, and the 3 things that I was probably most proud of being able to do during those 10 years was, first of all, doubling the size of Markham Stouffville Hospital. It was not really recognized downtown at Queen's Park that it was such a priority, and I invited the then minister to come and drive around the area, Markham and Stouffville, and see the growth, and that we just needed that hospital desperately. So that was one thing that I was proud of to achieve during that time. The other was, as we heard from people, improving GO Transit, very important for so many people commuting downtown, and we increased the trains and the buses and hopefully made them a little more convenient for people. Another area was the formation of the Rouge Park. I was on the Rouge Park Alliance as the provincial rep for over 5 years, and was instrumental finally in transferring the provincial lands into the park to ensure that the park would be ecologically sound in its formation. And of course we have now the wonderful Rouge National Urban Park right on our doorstep. When I was at Queen's Park, I served on many committees. I was a Liberal caucus chair. I was Minister of Community and Social Services, and for 123 whole days, the Minister of Health and Long-Term Care. And during that time, I always found my way to reach across the aisle. We were in a minority government for a number of those years to ensure that we listened to the other side. And we amended legislation in order to ensure that we had the best possible consensus as to what was going to be good for the people in our individual ridings, but across the province. So I believe I have the energy and the experience to move forward and represent the people again at the federal level. Now, the federal government over the last 4 years has made a number of, I think, important steps forward in terms of helping the middle class, whether it be in lowering taxes, whether it be in putting a higher tax actually on the very wealthiest people, trying to bring some better equality for income, a number of issues related to climate change. But of course, we've got so much more to do. And what I'm looking forward to tonight is hearing from you just how we can best move forward. I've been knocking on doors, and one thing I want to tell you, that we certainly have a lot of work to do, and I will work hard to do just exactly that. Thank you.
Thank you, Helena. I omitted one thank you. Thank to all of you for showing up. We're near standing room only. It's a great show of interest in this election. Appreciate your attendance. And if you came in late and you're looking for a chair, we've got 7 or 8 up the front row. Again, don't be shy. Come on up to the front. We'll now proceed with the first series of questions. These were the questions provided to the candidates from the Chamber of Commerce and the library in advance so they could prepare their answers. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to answer. Question 1. Affordable housing has been an issue for residents of York Region for many years. Housing York Inc. spoke to both Whitchurch-Stouffville Town Council and more recently community members about its intention to build a 6-story, 100-unit facility at 5676 Main Street in Stouffville. That's just east of Metro on the site of the Chas Richards and Son Farm Machinery outlet, which is closed on the weekend. Presently, many Whitchurch-Stouffville renters spend more than 30% of their income on housing, and the latest numbers from Housing York indicate that 3,200 households on the affordable housing wait list have identified Whitchurch-Stouffville as a desired location to live. With these statistics in mind, how will you and your party support a national housing strategy? First up, Jeremy Lynn.
Thanks again. To be honest, in regards to housing, our party feels like it's more of a, in recent years, unfortunately, a lot of issue has been overlapping between provincial, federal, and municipal government, and we feel like the solution for affordable housing mostly lies in the municipal area. I've noticed when I was doing my research that certain municipality, they approve the permits for development of housing a lot faster than others. So we are hoping that we can work with municipal government to be able to increase the speed at which they develop a lot of these things. Again, the issue is mostly supply and demand. Our party also wishes to reduce immigration. So we hope that in doing so, we will be able to ease off the demands for housing, allow the supply to eventually catch up and, sort of like rebalance itself or equilibrium. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Next candidate, Hal Berman.
Thank you very much. So the NDP does recognize the challenges to affordable housing. In fact, there are 1.7 million Canadians or Canadian households that spend more than 30% of their income on housing. We think that needs to change, and we think we need to make a big difference. The Conservatives did not do a good job in terms of affordable housing in 10 years in government, and the Liberals have since spent even less. People should be able to live in the communities where they grew up or where they choose to make their lives. The NDP has a plan to create 500,000 units of affordable housing over the next 10 years, and this is going to include a $5 billion investment over the next year and a half. We're going to include a system called the Fast Starts Fund, which allows projects to get off the ground very quickly. So co-op housing, affordable housing, and that's for rental housing. But there are some people who want to aspire to having a home of their own. And so the NDP's plan is to reintroduce the 30-year amortization on mortgages to allow people to get by with smaller payments over a longer period of time. We're also going to double the first-time home buyer's tax credit to $1,500. And in order to get some sort of control over housing prices that are just skyrocketing, we are going to clamp down on foreign buyer speculators. And if you don't live in Canada, you will pay a tax on your house if you buy it. So those are some of the ideas that we have to address the affordable housing issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Hal. Jane Philpott.
Thank you. To have shelter, to have a place to lay your head at night, to have a place to call home is one of our most basic human needs. And here in Markham-Stouffville, we do have challenges, ranging from affordable housing for young people to hidden homelessness right here in Whitchurch-Stouffville. Housing experts agree that some of the solutions being offered by parties will not actually address affordability. To fix the housing affordability problem, the #1 initiative we need is to have more rental space. We need a federal government that will support building quality, attractive, mixed income, family-friendly units near public transit. And here in Markham-Stouffville, we have a serious shortage of rental space. Some renters pay, when you include both their housing costs and their transportation costs, up to 2/3 of their income. And the worst hit groups include seniors, people under 30, single parents, and recent immigrants. With over 3,000 households here waiting for affordable housing in Stouffville, there is a national housing strategy, but it's been barely implemented. And if re-elected, I will continue the work that I've already started to work with organizations like Housing York, with developers, with not-for-profit organizations, and all orders of government to get properties built and get families off that wait list. There is a national housing co-investment fund that provides resources for affordable units, accessible units, and those that are energy efficient. When we all work together, we will be able to make sure everyone has a place to call home. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Elena Jazik.
Well, thank you. And I was excited to hear about this 100-unit opportunity here in Whitchurch, Stouffville. And I'm also aware of another one down in Markham, which I think will also follow very nicely as an opportunity to provide more housing. As Jane has said, in 2017, the National Housing Strategy was developed by the Liberal government, and there are a number of funds. The one that Jane mentioned is specifically to be funding for municipalities to actually create the housing. There's another one that particularly allows for subsidizing rental incomes. There's another one also that allows for the transfer of federal lands, so that surplus lands, so that in fact builders have an incentive to build on those lands as well. So there's a real opportunity to move forward on the 2017 legislation. I just want to mention the one in Markham because it's something that I think is extremely important. It's a proposal to allow adults with developmental disabilities to live on their own with support in units, and the concept is that it would be a 90-unit apartment building, 30 for adults with developmental disabilities, and some 60 for seniors. And you can be sure that if elected, I'm going to be following up and making sure that the project here in Whitchurch, Stouffville is top of the list, and also the one in Markham gets every opportunity to be looked at by Housing York and hopefully, obviously, built as soon as we possibly can get them built. Thank you.
Thank you, Alina. Roy Long.
Thank you. Policy is important. Policy is the details, it's the plans. But I got to be honest with you, I am not a policy guy. You can have the world's best policy, great plans for climate change, for housing, whatever, but if you don't have the people, you have nothing. First, you have to have the people know there's a problem. Then you have to have people believe there's a problem. And in this day and age of Facebook spreading lies left, right, center, it's hard to get people to believe there's a problem. Look at climate change. We can't even get people to agree there's climate change because of all the lies on Facebook. And then you got to get people to care about the problem. When I'm sitting in my 3,000 square foot house that I bought 40 years ago and is all paid, I don't know about a housing crisis. So you got to get people to know about the housing crisis, to believe in it, and to care about it. Once you have people, the policy is like the cart. People are the horse. We're the horse. We need to all believe, all care about this problem, and then we can get policy happening. Now, having said I'm not a policy guy, the Green Party does have 3 policies. First of all, if this is a problem, which we all agree it is, we should have a Minister of Housing. So that's the first thing, appoint a Minister of Housing. Secondly, $750 million donated to the National Housing Co-Investment Fund. Sorry, I had to read that. I couldn't memorize it. And another $750 million to the Canadian Housing Benefit Program. So we have 3 specific policies to deal with this. But first, we have to get all the people in this neighborhood Because when they go to build a new apartment building or a new condo, you have people protesting because they don't believe that we need it. We get the people, then we get the policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. That was question number 1. On to number 2. Artificial intelligence, automation, big data. These are just some of the forces changing how we live and work. We're seeing the importance of intangibles like intellectual property growing dramatically in importance, with our ability to develop and attract 21st century skills fast becoming critical to our economic success. Yet, so many areas of Canada, including parts of Whitchurch Stouffville, are underserved, with limited access to high-speed networks. If elected, what will you and your party do to improve access to high-speed networks across Canada, and in particular our community, and ensure that service is affordable? First up on this question, Hal Berman.
Thank you very much. Reliable high-speed broadband across Canada is vital for the economic health of all of our communities. We do everything online now. When I first started working as a physician, we didn't really even have an electronic record. I'm a lot older than I look. Now, I sit by my computer and I send a prescription for a patient to the pharmacy before I even leave the patient's home, and I use a wireless connection for that. Sometimes I use the patient's connection, sometimes I have to link it to my phone. We do this all the time in so many different ways. There's even important things outside of medicine too, I'm sure, that we use it for. So we all need to have good access to broadband, and there are a lot of areas that do not have broadband. So the NDP is committed to making sure every community has access to high-speed broadband without delay. The other thing we'll do is abolish data caps, because people should be able to use as much high-speed broadband as they need. Now, this also ties into our wireless strategy. Right now, raise your hand if you're not paying enough for your phone. No, of course not, right? Nobody is. The NDP is going to put a price cap until the industry is more competitive. We will make sure that people have access to basic plans, but real basic plans that actually are competitive with other places in the world. And we won't ask telecoms to lower their prices like Mr. Trudeau says he's going to. We're actually going to legislate. We'll make it happen. We're going to tell them they have to, because if we ask big business to do us a favor, they will only do us the favor if there's something in it for them. But now, I think we need to do things that's in it for us. Thanks.
Thank you, Hal. Jane Philpott.
Thank you. Well, the question actually provided the 2 key problems that we have here in Markham-Stouffville, and particularly in Whitchurch-Stouffville, related to broadband. And one is access to reliable high-speed broadband, and the second is, as others have mentioned, the cost. I know that Stouffville families, some of them spend 10% or more of their income on their phone, internet, and television needs. And rural Canadians in particular pay more for what is slower and less reliable internet. There are households in rural communities that are spending $20 more per month on telecommunications needs rather than their urban counterparts right here in town. Better broadband, as has been mentioned, is essential for those who work at home. It's essential for our educational needs, our healthcare needs, including telehealth and virtual care, and many other government services. I'm pleased to say that this is something we have fought for over the last 4 years in my office, and we have made some progress working together with other orders of government. We've participated in York Region's Broadband Task Force, and I've met with the highest levels of management in the internet service providers, including Bell Canada, for example. But all orders of government have to work together on this, and it is easily agreed that we need to expand competition in this field. There's existing infrastructure which is not accessible to some of the smaller ISPs, and we need better access for those third-party providers. The priority has to continue to be able to provide fairness for those in rural and semi-rural areas and make sure that internet connectivity is truly unlimited. Most parties agree on this need. You need someone that's going to help to deliver.
Thank you. Alina Jazik.
Well, thank you, and I certainly agree with fellow panelists on a number of the issues. A few years ago, I was able, as the provincial rep, to actually obtain some funding for a study to see if Whitchurch Stouffville could expand broadband. And unfortunately, I believe there were a number of technical issues. We know we live in the most beautiful part of the province, but the hills and valleys of the Oak Ridges Moraine made the project at that particular time very difficult and very expensive. However, obviously with new technology, I feel very confident that we will be able to look at this again. The federal government, or the Liberal Party in particular, has included in its platform a commitment to ensure 95% of Canadian homes and businesses will have high-speed internet by 2026. On the issue of affordability, we are actually intending, as the Liberal Party, to use regulatory powers to cut the cost of services by some 25%. It is by, as Jane said, by inviting mobile virtual technology to be part of the competition. So we're going to enlarge the number of suppliers using market forces and require the actual provision of the service to be reduced by some 25% for individuals, for businesses. It should make a tremendous difference. You can be sure that if I'm elected, I will be fighting for Whitchurch Stouffville to get connected. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy Long.
Thank you. There was a time when the internet was a luxury. It was something we would use to watch funny cat videos or funny dog videos. But today, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. If you're a doctor in a rural community, as we have a few doctors here, if your kid breaks his leg, they can send an x-ray down to an expert down at Sick Kids Downtown, look at it, send it back, if you have high-speed internet. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. If your kid needs to do a school project, he can't wait forever. He needs the high-speed internet. And especially small businesses. If you want to sell goods, set up websites, order goods, do your taxes, and especially process credit cards, if you want to do any of that and have a small business, you need high-speed internet. And the wonderful thing about the high-speed internet, it levels the playing field. So somebody in downtown Toronto or somebody 10 miles north of Stouffville are all on the same level playing field. And that's what Canadians love. We love fairness. We love when everybody's on the same playing field. So to help level out the playing field and make it more even for everyone, the Green Party is committed to putting $6 billion to the connectivity strategy. And that's going to help build up high-speed internet all around the country, but especially in the rural areas. And our goal is to get 95% of homes on high speed within the next 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy Lin.
Yeah. I do agree that high-speed internet is something that we basically need now. And I think that for a lot of rural area, if we can give them access to high-speed internet, it might be able to increase their business productivity and the economic activity, which will probably be able to offset the cost that the federal government sometimes has to put into the community. So we will probably set up an independent review, to see how we can cost effectively, build these infrastructure into the rural community, and so then it can offset the cost that we're spending in other ways. I don't really want to legislate, company to to fix prices, because I think that there is consequences to that. When rent control was imposed in Toronto, a lot of developers stopped building apartments, and business wants to make money. If they are able to deliver the product and they make money and the customer are happy, it's a win-win scenario. I believe that if if we were to impose that, on companies, it's going to have some negative consequences afterwards. So, but either way, we will look at ways to be able to cost effectively bring these high-speed access to the rural community. Thank you.
Thank you all. Our third question is all about global warming. Globally, 2016 was the warmest year on record, and the last 5 years are on track to be the warmest ever in the planet's history. While Canada has signed the Paris Accord, the Government of Canada does not yet appear to have a plan in place to meet and surpass those emissions targets. What will you and your party do to put a price on carbon emissions, develop and promote a national renewable energy policy, end fossil fuel subsidies, and encourage the creation of an increasing number of high-quality, sustainable jobs in the renewable energy sector? First up, Jane Philpott.
Thank you for a very important question. It is a scientific fact that the climate is changing, and we know that it's largely caused by human activity. We have a collective obligation to act with urgency. If not, we all and our children and grandchildren are going to suffer from the increased effects of severe weather patterns, oceans rising, droughts, floods, wildfires, and storms. Canada does have targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but the targets are too low and we are not on track to meet them. The target currently is a 30% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from 2005 levels by the year 2030. But that target is unfortunately insufficient to be able to hold global temperature rising to 1.5 degrees Celsius, and we will fall short of our 2030 targets. So we need to set better greenhouse gas emission targets, and we need to be held accountable, hold government accountable, so that our youth will be able to depend on us to make sure that their future and the future of our planet is protected. To change everything, we need everyone on board. We need that accountability at the government level, including an all-party climate action task force, as well as an independent body of external experts. And we need to invest in the green economy, because we know that investments in wind, water, and solar energy are actually growing faster than other parts of the economy and provide better job creation. We need to make sure that we've got more opportunities for clean transportation, including mass transit, more passenger rail, and more access to zero-emission vehicles. I have lots of ideas, and I'm looking forward to working on them if re-elected by you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Helena Jazyk.
Well, I think at this point, everyone acknowledges that climate change is real, and it is a real threat to our planet. In terms of what the Liberal plan is, it is quite ambitious. We are putting forward the idea of incentives for electric vehicles, including ensuring that there are sufficient charging stations across the country. There will be interest-free loans for retrofitting your home. So there are a number of things that you as an individual can do. Obviously, government has a major role to play, and I certainly am all for accelerating our progress on this. As you probably know, Ontario phased out coal-fired generating plants many years ago, and it's absolutely time for the rest of Canada to catch up with that. In terms of the transition, we know that for some provinces this is going to be tough. And so we need to ensure that people who work in the particular industry, the oil and gas industries, they need to have a transitional plan to move them off of their reliance on those jobs. And there will be new jobs. There will be jobs in terms of improving our resources, sustainable resources, hydro, wind, solar, and so on. So we do have an ambitious plan, and I think everyone needs to get on board. One of the pieces I really like about the Liberal plan is the desire to plant some 2 billion trees in the next 10 years. Not only will that help in terms of carbon emissions, it will also be a great opportunity for communities to get together to plant those trees. So that's something I'm looking forward to doing in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Helena. Roy Long.
First, I'd like to talk about the carbon tax. Who here thinks pollution is a good idea? Put up your hand. Anybody? Come on, somebody. I think that's one thing we can all agree on. Pollution is bad. Can we also agree, if you pollute, you should pay, and if you don't pollute, you shouldn't? And that's why the carbon tax, and I'm going to call it a tax, it's not a rebate, it's a tax. It's a fair tax. If you pollute, you pay. If you don't, you don't pay. And that's why most Canadians are in favor of this. We know, most of us know, global warming is a real thing. But I've shaken 2,000 hands in this neighborhood, and there are still a lot of people who don't believe in it. There's still a lot of people who get their news from Facebook and believe it's a scam. So my party is 100% behind the carbon tax because we think it's a fair way to reduce pollution. Oil subsidies. Right now we subsidize, and it was still both the two big parties giving $4 billion of your tax money away to the oil companies. For God's sakes, the oil companies have been in business for 100 years. They make a lot of money. Do they really need a handout from you? Now, I want to cut it off tomorrow, but we can't. We got to phase that subsidy out over the next couple of years because when you just cut a program like that, it hurts too many people. And the third thing I want to talk about is jobs. Right now, there's 62,000 jobs in oil. That's a lot of jobs. But there's four times as many jobs in renewable energy. There's 250,000 jobs in renewable energy. So if you want to go where the jobs are, you go to renewable energy. And the great thing about those jobs is your kid doesn't have to move to Fort Mick, whatever the heck it is, in the middle of Alberta to get a good paying job. You can get one right here, retrofitting a house, designing an electric bus, or doing some other green energy project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Roy. Jeremy Lin.
Well, I guess I'm one of those who gets my fake news from Facebook, I guess. Because I disagree with Roy Long. I had a debate with him already at Unionville, and as far as carbon dioxide being called a pollutant, I don't agree with that. Even on the Green Party website, it is a greenhouse gas emission. Yes, it does make, the planet a little bit warmer, but it's definitely not a pollutant. Plant, trees, and other life on this planet, essentially needs it, and we get our food from, the plants and trees. I don't want to put a price on carbon because a lot of working class people, ordinary folks, they, will still continue to pay the amount that they need to be able to get to work, especially those in the rural area. I know that when the carbon tax was implemented, I still paid at the pumps because I need to get to work. I need to, go visit people and things along that line. We will focus on cleaning the water. We will focus on cleaning the land, the soil. We will focus on good air quality. But if the situation is as dire as some people are claiming it to be, carbon tax is not going to do anything. We would need much more drastic solution if we want to save the planet. And as far as the country that are emitting the most carbon dioxide, the US, China, India, Russia, they either haven't signed on to the Paris Accord agreement or they they're not targeting their mission, meeting their mission. So I feel like it will be just penalizing ordinary Canadian. And there's been articles in the past, since 1970 talking about this, and yet the computer model and projection has been wrong, including Peter Spielsman's article in 1989 where he claims that most nations would be underwater by the year 2000. And this is a published article that you can find. It has been fact-checked by people on Google, which, and also again, okay, well, I'm done, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Last up on this question, Hal Berman. Hal?
So whether we like it or not, climate change is probably the defining issue of this election. We need to make decisions now. We don't have 4 more years to wait. And the NDP has a multi-pronged approach to global warming and greenhouse gas emissions. First of all, we're committed to retrofitting all housing stock by 2050. That, not only is that going to save a lot of energy, decrease emissions, but it will also create a ton of jobs, good well-paying jobs, hopefully union jobs, where people will be able to work in their communities to provide this retrofitting work. We will continue with carbon pricing. Carbon tax is important. We're all behind it. The only difference that we would have with that is that we would eliminate the exemptions for that the Liberals gave to the big polluters, because if you pollute, you should pay. Carbon taxes do reduce emissions, because if you have to pay a carbon tax, you will get a cheaper, or not cheaper, but a car that uses less gas. Or you'll go with an electric vehicle because you won't be paying as much carbon tax. So carbon taxes do work. We will eliminate the fossil fuel tax subsidies because they don't need our subsidies. What we need is clean air, clean water, and we need to use that money to actually go into a green economy, create really good jobs. We will modernize and expand public transit. We are going to set an example by electrifying the Canadian government's fleet. We will also invest in smart grid technology with green energy projects, and we have a goal of a carbon-free electricity by 2030. So there's a lot of things that we have to do, and we're willing to work with the Green Party because they may have some ideas that are even better.
Thank you, Hal. A good segue into our fourth question, which is on the Canadian workforce. As the world of work constantly evolves, finding the right talent with the right skills and training at the right time remains one of the biggest challenges, and doing so is growing more difficult as industries adapt to new technologies and new ways of doing business. For Canadian companies to grow and thrive, they need access to a skilled workforce. If elected, what will you and your party do to ensure Canada's workforce has the skills, education, training, and retraining programs needed to help businesses succeed regardless of industry or region? First up on this one, Helena Jazik. Helena?
Well, we certainly know that obviously for businesses to thrive, they need that skilled workforce. And we know that while we do have low unemployment, very low unemployment at the moment, businesses are still struggling to find the workers that they need. Now, one of the things I've heard at doors is that people are very upset about the cuts that Premier Ford and the Conservative government in Ontario has made to OSAP. And so one of the things that the Liberal platform includes is an increase to the Canada student grants so that there will be reduced interest costs on Canada student loans and an improved repayment assistance program. And so this will also help adults to retrain as well, and people receiving EI. This has been a focus of the Liberal government to date, but we know that costs are going up, whether it be for rent, books, groceries, they've all increased, and this is a real financial pressure on students. And so there will be an increase in the grants program of some $1,200 per year, and we'll give students up to 2 years to start to repay their loans. That'll be an interest-free period. And also they will not need to repay their loan until they're earning some $35,000. So on the education side, we're trying to do everything we can to ensure that that skilled workforce is there. Now that applies to colleges and universities, and we also need to do a lot in terms of the skilled trades, so that we're going to be working on apprenticeship programs to ensure that apprentices get the type of work experience they need to achieve their certification and therefore be able to work as journeymen, journeymen, in fact, in their trade from that time forward. So there are a number of aspects to this to ensure that we have the right mix of employees to obviously serve our growing community and also the businesses that need them.
Thank you, Helena. Roy Long?
I love this number. 62,000 jobs in the oil fields and 4 times as many in green energy jobs. That's where our focus should be. And that's not even the limit of it. Besides the 250,000 jobs in green energy, there's another 400,000 jobs in something called efficiencies. I wasn't sure what efficiencies are. That's when somebody goes into your house and makes it more efficient, puts in a tankless hot water heater, goes in, redoes your attic and makes it more energy efficient. So when you add up all those jobs, it's almost 1 million jobs. 62,000 in oil, almost 1 million in energy efficiency and green energy jobs. That's where the focus has got to be for the future. Now, to get people ready for that, we're going to have to get our young people ready. A lot of them have these dead-end jobs at the big box store for a little over minimum wage, and they want a good job. I've been coaching hockey in this neighborhood for the last 20 years, and I see how energetic and talented our young people are. Not all of them are going to get 95 in physics and design electric buses, but a lot of them are great with their hands, they're hard workers, and they're smart, and we can get green energy jobs for them. And what the Green Party wants to do is take $1 billion and invest it, and I don't mean spend it, I mean invest it, because we're going to get that money back in the Youth Employment Skills strategy. And that's going to help train kids to become skilled workers, electricians, plumbers, pipe fitters, so that they can take part in the boom in green energy jobs, because that is the future. Canada can either be a follower or we can be a leader. I know that China and other places don't want to be leaders. Canada can be a leader in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Jeremy Lin.
Yeah, thank you again. I don't know why, I always get thrown off after listening to Roy speak. We would, any federal retraining program in regards to jobs, we will make sure that it aligns with the skills that are needed. Like there are several companies and businesses that needs worker, and instead of just having, job retraining that has nothing to do with the skill set that are missing, we will work with the provincial government to make sure that all retraining stuff is in areas where there are jobs in it. And then we will also try to direct, schools and universities to encourage students to take classes that, are in fields that, how do I say it? They're in fields that will lead to jobs in the future. And this is very difficult. This is something that's going to be constantly changing. When I was in York University, they talked about how they built the computer science engineering building. And, 10 years later, after they built it, those jobs were no longer in demand. So we're going to have to adapt. We're going to have to get the private company, whenever they support retraining and reskilling, but it's going to have to be in areas where there are jobs, instead of just giving money out over and over again, because there's so many people now, so many students that are in debt right now, and you can't just, we'll give them a longer loan, we will put them in these programs, and then when they come out, they have no jobs. So it can't just be about throwing money. We have to direct it toward the programs and the classes that leads to jobs, whatever it is that's in demand. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Hal Berman.
I have 2 kids. My daughter's 12, my son's almost 11, and I have no idea how they're going to get jobs. Because first of all, I don't know what they want to do yet. My son wanted to be a dinosaur last I heard. But I don't know how they're going to get the education that I got to get a job. When I went to university, I remember discussing this with a medical student. 10 years of university, including medical school, costs less than 1 year in medical school now. And that's just one professional degree. But tuition is huge. And it's made worse because right now the federal government has been taking interest from student loans to the tune of $3 billion in the last 4 years, while they've forgiven corporations loans by $6 billion in the same time. That's absolutely ridiculous. We need to support all post-secondary education, whether it's in a trade, whether it's in a degree, whether it's in politics, stuff like that. One of my degrees is in politics. We need to support our students, and the NDP is going to stop collecting interest, first of all, and then we're going to move towards a grant-based system, no loans at all, because education should be available to everybody, not just the 1% or the 5%. It should be the 100%. Anybody who can benefit from it should benefit from it. The economy is moving to a green economy, and we have to bring workers who are working in the oil industry with us. We can't just create new jobs. We have to bring these people and retrain them as well. So the NDP has a plan for retraining. We also have to support our employers, and one of the ways we're going to do that is we're going to institute PharmaCare. PharmaCare will save employers $600 per employee. That will help them invest in training, and it helps invest in new jobs.
Thank you, Hal. Jane Philpott.
There's no question that the Canadian workforce has changed in many years. There are now fewer permanent full-time positions for people of all ages. People are using more contract work, and they're having to move in order to find jobs. And there are fewer and fewer jobs that have stable benefits. So there's no question that we need to support workers in this changing work environment. Some of that involves some of the education and retraining initiatives that my colleagues have mentioned, including addressing the high cost of interest rates on student loans. I don't believe it's been mentioned yet, but there is a new Canada training benefit which pays for retraining with income support over a number of years. But the whole post-secondary training landscape has to change so that there can be more access to online courses, for example, shorter courses, because not everybody can go to school for 2 or 4 years in order to get retrained, and certainly more access to apprenticeships. There should be a move gradually to competency-based accreditation, because many of our young people know exactly how to do the jobs that need to get done. They don't always have a piece of paper that shows it to them. But if you'll permit me, I want to mention one other issue which is very much affecting our workforce, and that is the lack of access to high-quality, affordable, universal childcare and elder care and care for persons living with disabilities. This is a barrier to accessing the workforce, particularly for women, and these unpaid care responsibilities are keeping women and others in part-time jobs and temporary jobs without benefits and security. So the issue of childcare and elder care has to be addressed in order to have a full representative workforce. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Healthcare is our next topic, and the question is, the Medical Care Act in Canada was adopted in 1966. Today, many Canadians consider the Canadian public health care system to be an icon of Canadian identity. How will you and your party work to preserve and expand the universal access, comprehensiveness, and portability of our public health care system across Canada? Leading off, Roy Long.
This is great. I'm up here. I had a first aid course in grade 9, and I'm going to lecture you guys on healthcare when I'm up here with 3 doctors. I feel like I'm a little out of my element here. The one thing I can say about healthcare is, the one thing I'm really good at is listening. So when experts tell me something that needs to be done, I will listen to it. The people in my neighborhood, I will listen to it, and I will try and combine those 2 things. And that's my approach on a personal basis. My party, we are for, and forgive me for using notes here, the PharmaCare prescription plan. That's what we're all in favor of, and I think everybody here can be in favor of it. A good friend of mine, he had a son who was born premature, and he brought him home, and OHIP paid for everything. It was great, but when he got home, he had to pay $524 a month for the drugs. And he was a working class guy, and it was like, how the heck am I going to afford this for the next 2 years? And those are the type of problems that people have. And we want to address that by bringing in the PharmaCare program. The other thing is, we are totally committed to the Canada Health Act. And right now, the funding for the Canada Health Act has been kind of wonked around a little bit. It's based on GDP instead of your actual needs. So we want the funding retooled for that so it matches the needs of a community, not their GDP. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Jeremy?
I guess I should stand because I notice everyone older than me is standing and I'm the one sitting all the time. All right. So I agree that the Canada Health Act is how do I say it? It's problematic. It creates a lot of conditions before the funds are transferred to the province. And again, this is one of those overlapping jurisdiction matter once again. So the People's Party of Canada will surrender basically the goods and service tax to the provinces so that the responsibility falls back on them. They can determine for themselves how best to take care of, the residents in each of their provinces. For the provinces that has less sales tax, good and service sales tax, we will compensate it by transferring certain funds. We would also like to see if maybe we can develop a mixed private healthcare system. And I know this sounds controversial to a lot of people, but hear me out. Most European countries do have a mixed private healthcare system, and their wait time are considerably less than us. And they do guarantee universal access. Of all the G7 nations, only the US does not. So it doesn't really harm the care of people of low income. It allows people who has the means to be able to, go to a private clinic It allows, ordinary citizen who don't to receive the care at the same level of funding that we already give to them, and hopefully with less people in the public system, it will ease off, the wait time. And yeah, and it'll also reduce costs. And there are a lot of things now where the federal government has already outsourced to private company, even though they say that, it's all publicly funded by the government. A lot of the best hospital, they get donation from charities. It's not just from the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Hal Berman.
So a few years ago, when my son was 3.5, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And he had a seizure disorder because of that. He's fine now, but for about 3 or 4 years, he was on very expensive medications. And for part of that time, I didn't have health insurance. And I was able to pay for that. I'm not complaining about any of the money that I paid for that. But I thought many times during that time, what would I do if I was working a minimum wage job? What would happen to my son? And that really hit me really hard. And that's why I am a huge proponent of universal pharmacare. Universal pharmacare, the way Tommy Douglas envisioned it, would eventually become: the government pays for it, you use your health card, you don't use your credit card. I know that the Liberals have talked about it. They've talked about it for decades, and they've promised $6 billion in healthcare spending in this election. We estimate it'll cost at least $10 billion a year just to bring this in, and we'll have it implemented within 1 year, at the end of 2020. We also think that Dentacare is really important too. You shouldn't have to worry about how you're going to pay to get your teeth cared for, because good maintenance is better than repairs, just like with a car. Right? Mental health needs to be integrated directly into primary care as well, and so we're going to work on that too. In terms of physician supply, there are people who are missing out on having a family doctor or a primary health care team, and yet there are thousands of doctors in Canada who are not credentialed to work here. So we're going to work on that as well. And by the way, I'm going to say right now, no private health care, because it does not actually decrease wait times in the public system. The NDP will fight that tooth and nail.
Thanks, Hal. Jane Philpott.
Well, thank you for the question, and I agree with my fellow panelists that we could have a very interesting discussion on health policy here tonight, and we could spend the whole evening talking about it. But I wanted to go back to where Jim started, which was with talking with the Medical Care Act, which was brought in at a time of great collaboration in the federal government. It was brought in under a prime minister who was one of our very best prime ministers, Lester B. Pearson, along with the support of his NDP colleague, Tommy Douglas, who brought in that act in 1966. It went on years later to become the Canada Health Act, which was brought in under Pierre Trudeau and the great Minister of Health, Monique Bégin. And I will also say that I will fight tooth and nail for the Canada Health Act, which is the fundamental piece of legislation that upholds our healthcare system that we are so proud of as Canadians, and that means that you will get the care that you need, based on your medical need and not based on your ability to pay. And we must continue to fight for that together. That's not to say that Medicare and healthcare are as good as they can be in Canada, and there are some missing pieces. One of the missing pieces is, of course, pharmacare, and it needs to be universal, single-payer, public pharmacare. We need a clear commitment to that, and that is something that I will absolutely advocate for, including a national formulary, not years from now, but immediately, including the dollars attached, hard timelines, no more studies, the evidence is clear. There are other missing pieces to healthcare that were not included in the Canada Health Act, including access to mental health services, home care, including palliative care, and confirmed access to primary care. We can do this working together with the provinces to make sure that Canadians get the care they need.
Thank you, Jane. Helena Jazik.
Well, I think you really do have a lot of agreement on the panel on this topic. There's no question that national pharmacare is the biggest missing piece in our publicly funded healthcare system. We, as the Liberal Party, are absolutely committed to that national drug formulary. There will be a decrease in drug prices if we purchase across Canada. You know that in Canada we pay some of the highest drug prices in the world, and it's absolutely outrageous. And that's one of the things with bulk purchasing, that we can reduce the costs. And we do need to implement it. I was part of the provincial government that did propose, as I hope you do remember, that we would implement pharmacare for everyone under the age of 25. That was a way of addressing the affordability issue, because this is an expensive proposition. The Liberal Party has committed $6 billion over 4 years for the establishment of a national pharmacare system. But one of the things I do want to address is mental health care, because this is what I'm hearing at the door a lot, in that even though it is a provincial responsibility to provide health care, the federal government does have significant pressure to that we are able to actually exert on the province by tying funds directly to needed services. And when it comes to mental health care, we need to treat it like any other physical illness. If there's an emergency, it needs to be addressed immediately. And I see that as a gap. I'm hearing about it a great deal from the residents in this particular area, and any future health accord must ensure that the provinces adhere to that principle. Thank you.
Thank you, Helena. Now for the last of the prepared questions that were given to the candidates in advance. It's a business question. Like their larger counterparts, Canadian small and medium companies need relief from tax and regulatory systems that have become increasingly complex and dysfunctional over the years. Those smaller and medium-sized businesses lack the resources of larger companies to access foreign markets. Additionally, the Canada Revenue Agency remains the most challenging federal agency for these companies to deal with, because its processes and procedures often do not align with the realities of having a small to medium-sized business. If elected, what will you and your party do to cut through the red tape and provide better resources and support for these small and medium-sized businesses? First up on this one, Jeremy Lin.
Thanks again. Sometime less is more, I think. So in regards to small businesses, among the G7 country, our small and medium businesses, their export only accounts for about 4%, while most other G7 country accounts for 20+%. So I think one of the things we need to do is have an analysis of sector by sector review instead of agreement by agreement in terms of the free trade agreement, and then make this information widely known to the small and medium businesses. We can also hire experts who will be able to pass these information on to the small and medium businesses, because most small and medium businesses don't have the time to search all these things up themselves. There is actually a lot of resources for them, but I think most of them, get preoccupied with, with doing business, of course. We'll audit the Canada Revenue Agency, identify and eliminate whatever it is that's, that's causing small and medium businesses difficulty, and we'll make sure that our policy aligns with their reality as opposed to, corporation which operates on a different level. And of course, we do plan to cut taxes for small and medium businesses because they do form the backbone of a lot of community, such as in Stouffville here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Hal Berman.
So without the businesses, there are no jobs. And without jobs, everybody's unemployed. So we understand the need to make it easier for small and medium-sized businesses to do business. And we're committed to cutting a lot of the red tape, to making it easier for companies to find export markets if that's what they choose. We also want to foster entrepreneurship and support Canadian startup culture. But I think it's really important to look at it from the workers' point of view, because workers are the lifeblood of any business. And we need to make it easier for companies to hire workers, because the more workers they have, the more they can get done. By implementing head-to-toe healthcare, by giving people pharmacare and access to all the other allied health, occupational therapy, physiotherapy, all of that stuff, there will be no need to pay for private health plans. That will save companies over $600 per employee, and that can be used to invest into the business. And that's going to be, not only is that going to help businesses, it's also going to lead to healthier employees and fewer days off work due to illness. So it's a win-win situation for everybody. We will also invest in research and development here in Canada. We are going to have a procurement policy that actually prioritizes Canadian jobs. So if you're making something in Canada and the government needs it, we're going to buy it in Canada. Why should we buy it elsewhere and give somebody else jobs when we're looking to try to maintain jobs here in Canada? And we are also going to invest in training so that companies have access to an educated, modern, trained, and flexible workforce so that whatever comes up, they're able to manage with that. And so I think we have a great plan to help small and medium-sized businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Hal. Jane Philpott.
Thank you for this question, and this is a very good question in an audience that is hosted in part by the Stouffville Chamber of Commerce, and I believe there are representatives here as well from the Markham Board of Trade. And as others have said, business is the driver of the Canadian economy, and particularly small and medium-sized businesses, which you may be surprised to know actually comprise 99.8% of Canadian businesses are classified as small or medium. They're not only the drivers of the economy, but they are, of course, the drivers of job creation as well. And this is one of the important reasons why we need to listen to business, why we need to listen to the burden that regulations can add on businesses. Regulations, of course, have their place when they're there to protect the health and safety and security of Canadians, but too many rules drags on business. And there was very recently an external advisory committee on regulatory competitiveness that released a number of recommendations as to how we can clean up regulations so as to let businesses thrive in the way that they should. Some of those recommendations have put in place, but not nearly enough of them. And one of the things that I was very delighted to be a part of when I was president of the Treasury Board was to introduce the very first regulatory modernization bill. This was a bill that was subsumed into the budget bill, but the idea was to listen to businesses and to get what the biggest irritants were around regulations and to be able to modernize those, in some cases to eliminate the unnecessary regulations altogether. So much more work needs to be done on that. There are provinces that have made great progress, including British Columbia's regulatory measurement program. The federal government needs to learn from that, and there are many other ways that we can help drive businesses in a successful way and be sure that they will have the incentives that they need to thrive. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jane. Helena Jazik.
Well, as we have heard, of course, small and medium-sized businesses really are the backbone of the economy in this country. And we know they do create good jobs, they support local communities, and they keep our economy moving forward. And so, in the past 4 years of the Liberal government, there was a move to lower the small business tax rate from 11% to 9%, saving businesses as much as $7,500 a year. And the government did listen to some of the concerns of the business community, including those of the Chambers of Commerce, both Board of Trade in Markham and here in Whitchurch Stouffville, into some of the proposed changes that were considered, and in fact the government did not proceed with those. And so going forward, there is a commitment to reduce the startup costs for incorporation by 75%. This should help some entrepreneurs out there to get going, and there will be an elimination of all fees of the Business Development Bank of Canada, also the Export Development Canada, and Farm Credit Canada for all their business advisory services. There's also going to be an elimination of the swipe fee on HST and GST for credit card transactions, and that was on the advice of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. So I think you can be assured the Liberal government is listening, and in particular on this question, the question of excess regulation related to CRA. Certainly if elected, I would want to hear exactly what the concerns are and make sure that I take those issues forward, because this sector is so incredibly important. One last thing, with the clean energy economy that we're looking at, we will be reducing corporate tax rates on clean tech companies by 50% to encourage that sector as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Helena. Roy Long.
Thank you. My family has had a small business down in Scarborough for the last 50 years. My dad started it. He came over on a boat from Ireland, started a little cabinet making shop, changed over, started repairing furniture. So we've had a small business in this country for the last 50 years. He had it, he handed it down to me. And if there's one thing that drives us nuts, it's dealing with the CRA. Anybody here ever call up the CRA? How long were you on hold for? Anybody get through in less than an hour? No, you can't get through. That is our one big issue. And for years, it's been a nightmare. You mail in your HST tax, you know you did it, and then you get a notice saying you didn't pay. And you phone up, and your secretary is on hold for an hour, for 2 hours, or she's on speed dial going click, 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 and you can't get through. And it's a nightmare. And I couldn't figure out why until I was camping, and I met a couple guys who work at the CRA, and they told me the reason is their morale is dismal. Previous governments sold us the idea that the CRA are a bunch of bad guys, and if we cut the funding to them, it'll make life better for everyone. No, it made life better for big companies and rich people who hide their money in the Cayman Islands. For the average person, by ruining the morale at the CRA, it means we can't get through. One tiny little thing, and we're on speed dial or on hold for hours. They took their best and brightest and moved them from Ottawa to little towns. And they said, I'm not moving. I'm not moving my kids to that dinky little town. I want to stay in Ottawa, or I want to stay in Vancouver. So the best and the brightest left, and you were left with the others. And their morale is horrendous. And when they have a pile of files to do they do the easy one that you did, where you took a few $100s in cash? Or do they do the one for the guy in the Cayman Islands? No, they don't, and I gotta stop. Bye.
Thank you all. That's the end of the first series of questions. We'll now move on to the second series, which are the questions that you gave to the volunteers, the ones that were collected from the audience. We've got about a half an hour, so we're going to try and squeeze as many of these in as possible. Ask the candidates to act as, to answer as quickly as possible and get through as many of these as we can. First one is for all candidates. You had a choice of ticking off who you wanted to answer. This one is for everyone. And the question is, do you live in the riding of Markham-Stouffville? And we flip the order around now. Hal Berman goes first.
So the answer to that question is no, I do not live in Markham-Stouffville. I'm running in Markham-Stouffville because the NDP really wanted to have somebody for you to vote for, and so they asked me. And I feel very strongly that every party should be represented on the ballot. And also, it was a great opportunity to meet some people that I've only read about and heard about and I respect a lot.
Jane Philpott.
I have lived in Whitchurch-Stouffville for the past 21 years. I currently live less than a kilometer from here on Baker Hill Boulevard.
Helena Jazik.
I'm a proud resident of East Gwillimbury, which, as you know, is just to the north of Davis Drive, and so I do not live in Markham-Stouffville. I have lived in York Region for some 30 years, and I've lived during that time in Richmond Hill, in Markham, Aurora, and now East Gwillimbury. And I can tell you, when I was the MPP for Oak Ridges Markham, people in King Township used to say to me, "Do you live in Markham?" And I would say, "No, I live in East Gwillimbury," and they were actually very happy about that. Obviously, I spent most of my life in Markham-Stouffville. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy.
I live exactly 2 blocks outside on the other side of the line. But the people in my neighborhood, we think of communities. We don't think of getting our passport out and going, "Oh, I'm going to Longos, I need my passport." And all the kids on my hockey team, half of them live in Markham, half of them live in Stouffville, half of them live in Unionville. That doesn't add up, does it? Off to you.
Hey, Jeremy.
Aren't we all glad we have Roy tonight here? Yes, I've lived in Stouffville for almost 7 years. My family have lived here for my extended family has almost lived here 10 years, so I have been coming up to visit for a long time. No offense to anyone who doesn't live here, but I think that when you're running for a riding, it is actually preferable to be in the riding, because there's things you find out about the riding only through daily interaction with the people in the riding. I know a lot of party likes to throw different candidates across the different ridings, but if it was up to me, I would just keep it within the riding. So yeah, I do live in this riding.
The next question is directed at Hal Berman and Helena Jazik. If you are asked by your party to support a position you believe to be unethical, or one that is contrary to the laws of Canada, i.e. selling asbestos to foreign countries that lack the health legislation we have, would you support the ethical position or vote with your party? We'll start with Helena on this one.
If I felt that I could not support a position of my party after all the discussion in caucus, as normally happens, again, just to clarify how legislation or decisions are made, they are made within the party by caucus. At least this is my experience. I was caucus chair under both Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne. And I can assure you, as caucus chair, I told everyone, put your ideas out in this room. Make your position very clear. We would hear from everybody. And then the caucus chair's role was to summarize the conversation and to say, this is the decision of caucus. And if by some chance a member disagreed with that position, it was quite clear they would either resign or they would keep the decision in the family. The majority decision would rule. Personally, I have never been faced with a decision that I felt was unethical or that I could not live with. If there was that situation, I would resign immediately.
And Hal Berman.
So before medical assistance in dying was legal, I was asked to help somebody pass more quickly than they otherwise would have. That was illegal at the time, and I said, no, it's illegal. It was the easy way out because it was illegal. And I would never do something illegal. I would never vote for something illegal. And I'm really proud that my party would never ask me to do something illegal. We actually believe in the rule of law, and we actually put our money where our mouth is for that. If there was something that I disagreed with the party, and I'm very thankful that having looked through the party platform now for 2 straight elections, I'm totally on board with everything. I would make my voice known. I would make my view known. And then we all have things that are deal breakers. If it was about a certain type of tax and it didn't get my way, I believe in a whip vote. I would vote what the party said to vote. If it was something that cut to my ethical values, I would say I can't support this, and I would have a talk within the party about that. If it was you have to vote for it or else, I would sit as an independent. If, there have been cases where the NDP, there have been people who have not been able to vote for certain things, and they've been allowed to abstain in those cases. If I was allowed to abstain, I would do so. But if there was something that the party was going to do in government that was completely against what I believed in, even if they allowed me to abstain, I would resign from the party. But luckily, I don't think it's ever going to be a problem.
Thank you, Hal. The next question is directed only at Jane Philpott. Question is, how do you intend to ensure your voice, and therefore the voice of your constituents, is heard as an independent? And how will you align with other parties when voting?
Thank you. I intend to make sure that I represent the people of Markham-Stouffville to the best of my ability to be a strong, independent voice for you. The good news is that as an independent member, I won't have a party leader, a party boss, telling me what to do, how to vote, what to say, and what not to say. I will be able to speak freely on your behalf. This will provide many opportunities to be able to speak up and say when legislation or policies are good or where they need improvement. I will have many opportunities as well, of course, to speak to the media, who find it quite delightful to be able to speak to a member of parliament who is not being dictated to through partisan media lines. And of course, in the event of a minority government, there could be even more opportunities to be able to be a strong voice for Markham-Stouffville in that event. I will collaborate with all parties, anyone who has a good idea. We have big problems to solve as a country, and we need to do that together.
Thank you. The next question is directed only at Jeremy Lynn. Jeremy, we are hearing dire warnings from all sides about a climate crisis. Do you think that we in Canada should be worried?
No, I don't think we should be worried. In the 1970s, Time magazine had articles about the second coming of an ice age. I gave the article about 1989 that was written by the UN. Both DiCaprio and Al Gore in the documentary, and I know they're not scientists, but they quoted from scientific source, and pretty much most of the computer model and projection has been wrong. If things do happen, we will respond to it, of course, but the climate of the Earth has always been changing throughout its history. We've had an ice age. I don't think we humans had anything to do with that. And in the prehistorical age, according to scientists, it was significantly warmer than it is now. So I think the Earth does undergo changes of and by itself, and I don't think it's something that we need to panic about. As far as the recent natural disasters concerned, well, I was looking back at some of the natural disasters in the early 1900s, and there were similar level of disaster, but that has also killed a lot more people because we did not have the technology to warn people in advance that, hurricane was coming, earthquake was coming, and things along that line. And like I said, if the situation is as dire as people say, then pricing people, taxing them is not the solution. The solution would be like to go really extreme, like, get every nation to ban carbon dioxide or something along that line. So I don't think we have anything to worry about. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeremy. The next question is directed at Helena Jazik. The Liberal platform forecasts nearly $100 billion in additional deficit over the next 4 years. The Finance Department does not predict a return to balanced budget until at least 2040, 21 years from now. What is your view on continued substantial deficits for the future? Helena?
We look at our proposed plan as an investment in Canadians. Essentially, what we're saying is that people need services now. There are many people who are truly struggling, and as you know, we've all been going door to door, and even in a relatively affluent area like Markham and Stouffville, we still see significant challenges around affordability for many, many people. In addition, we're living through a time when there is a Conservative government provincially, and the cuts that are being made by the Ford government are really impacting on people. And so, essentially, our plan does increase our investments in a number of what we think are very important areas. You've heard about National Pharmacare. We're talking about increasing the Canada Child Benefit, especially children under the age of 1 by some 15%. As we mentioned through the course of the evening, the Canada Student Loans and grants are both going to be increased because we desperately need that skilled workforce. We're going to invest in things like childcare so people can get to work, both husband and wife, or both parents. We're going to increase preschool and after-school programs. These are things that will, in fact, help our economy. People are willing to work, they're trying to get those jobs, and they need some assistance. We will increase the deficit to some $27 billion over the 4-year term, but our debt to GDP ratio is going to remain 30.2%, and that is less than any other G7 country. We think this is the time to make those investments, and that's our plan.
Thank you. The next question is for all of the candidates. It is, our taxes fund government programs and initiatives that contribute to making Canada the great country it is. However, while other jurisdictions make their tax systems more competitive, Canada is becoming increasingly complex and inefficient, killing investments and jobs. Compounding the challenges created by our outdated tax system are the federal debt and deficit. Canada's fiscal flexibility is extremely limited, and there is no clear plan for returning to balance. If elected, what do you and your party plan to do to address our outdated tax system? We'll start with Hal Berman on this one.
Okay, of course, you're going to start with the party that will tax, right? And Jagmeet Singh was clear. He spoke to the Canadian Club and said, we're going to ask those who can to pay a bit more. We can't keep investing in all the things that need investment without a source of revenue. When people who are wealthy drive along the street, they benefit from infrastructure. When they have a company that creates goods and wealth for them, they benefit from the infrastructure we have put in. We need to start paying for the things that we want. We have to pay for our health care. We can't just keep on running bigger and bigger deficits. One of the problems with the previous governments is that they were very eager to provide, bourgeois tax cuts, boutique tax cuts to the wealthy. They were very happy to announce new spending, but they were very, very reluctant to increase taxes. And without revenue, you cannot afford to spend. And so the NDP will ask those who can, and I'm actually one of those people who would love to pay more taxes. I don't want to spend them on F-35 fighter jets. I want to spend them on health care. But if you told me I have to pay more taxes so that we can have a better society, I'm all for it. I'm willing to make that commitment. I think we all should. If we're able to, we should be paying more.
Thank you, Hal. Jane Philpott.
Thank you, Jim, for the question. And I think I heard three key issues that you brought up in that. Number one was tax complexity. Number two was tax fairness. And the third was fiscal responsibility. And I'll just speak briefly to each of those. Certainly from the point of view of complexity, those of you who do your own taxes know just how hard and complicated it is. And I would agree with Hal that there is much more that can be done to be able to simplify taxes. We know that, for instance, many of the boutique tax credits that the governments are prone to want to put in for a variety of reasons for electoral benefit often simply add to complexity and don't always achieve their policy objectives, and there's certainly work to be done in that area. Tax fairness is certainly the other issue that where there has been some progress that has been done, and certainly reducing taxes on the middle class has been something that the current government has effectively done, and that has borne benefits, particularly using the Canada Child Benefit. But the third area is probably the most important, and that's fiscal responsibility. Canadians are really nervous about our growing deficit, and looking at the possibility that we're going to be facing a $30 billion deficit in the year 2021 is something that concerns us all. Yes, there may be slight progress in the debt to GDP ratio, but we don't know when we're going to face another serious recession. They come along about every 10 years. It's absolutely possible that we could face that in the next year or two. We live in a complex and unstable world. Massive deficits are not in our best interest, so we need to be really smart about how those investments are made.
Thank you. Helena Jazik, please.
I certainly do agree heartily with Jane on this one. I've always considered myself a fiscal conservative, even though I believe in liberal policies in terms of the social aspects that are espoused by the Liberal Party. I am concerned in terms of the potential for global downturn, and you can be sure that if I'm elected, I will express those views, because I've certainly heard them at the door as well. Having said that, Canada presently is in a very enviable position. We do have AAA credit ratings. We are doing better, as I said before, in terms of the debt to GDP ratio, which is an important indicator, and that will be being reduced. But in the face of unexpected circumstances, we need to proceed cautiously. And what I see in the Liberal plan is actually an incremental approach to the programs that we have in our platform. And so I think we need to keep a very careful eye on what is happening globally, but with the intention, as I said before, to make the investments where they're needed for people, and they are truly needed right now. So in terms of our economy, it is doing extremely well, as you know, record low unemployment, but we need to keep our eye on the ball. There is absolutely no question about it. But that's exactly what governments need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Helena. Roy Long.
Thank you. If you want to balance the budget, you got to do three things. Number one, you got to cut spending, and the Green Party has a plan for that. Number one, take the $4 billion we give to the fat cat oil executives every year in subsidies and put that back into our coffers. The second thing is raise revenues. By investing in the CRA and making them more efficient, we can chase after all those people who are hiding their money in the Cayman Islands while you and you and you all pay your fair share of taxes. And the third thing, the most important thing you can do, is grow the economy. Because if you grow the economy, you're going to bring in more revenue. So by not spending, but investing money in young people, in renewable energy, so we have more jobs from coast to coast, high-skilled jobs, high-tech jobs, high-knowledge jobs. When we grow the economy, that is the real way you're going to balance the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Jeremy?
Yeah. Under both the Liberal and the Conservative government in the last 10 years, the federal deficit has increased. So I find it a little bit hard to believe that, when you ask them about this issue and they say that they care about it, that they're going to do something about it. If you vote for the Liberal or the Conservative and you care about fiscal responsibility, you're probably just going to be deceived once again. The PPC is committed to reducing the deficit. We don't want to cut into the social program, so there is things that we're going to do, such as defunding the CBC, stop spending money on foreign nation that has, nothing to do with humanitarian stuff, and we intend to, like I said, cut taxes, grow the economy, and as the economy grows, we can have more revenues. I understand the temptation to tax rich people all the time for everything, but, yes, we need to tax them, but at the same time, the world that we live in today is not the same as it was before. They can move to other places, and states like Illinois and New York and, Maryland, most of them has already fled to other states because of lower taxes. We need to find a way to be able to generate income without always just relying on the rich. John F. Kennedy once said, and I know it's a little old-fashioned, but he once said that, ask not what the nation can do for you, but what you can do for the nation. So we need some personal responsibility, and we need to grow the economy, and we need to get everybody actively involved in generating revenues. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you to the candidates, and thank you for your questions. That ends the Q&A section of this meeting. We'll now ask the candidates for their closing remarks. Each will have 3 minutes. We'll start with candidate 3, Hal.
I recently saw a video of Ryan Melly. He's the leader of the Saskatchewan New Democratic Party, and he was explaining why a doctor would go into politics. He said he was tired of advocating for his patients, knocking on the same doors for help and getting the same people answering and saying no. And he realized that the doors weren't the problem, it was the people that were answering them. For too long we've been electing the wrong people. We've been sucked in by promises, become disappointed, and then we vote for the other party with their promises, and then we get disappointed again. It reminds me of the story that Tommy Douglas told about Mouseland, where the mice elected black cats, and they weren't happy with them, so they elected white cats. And then they elected white cats and black cats and called it a coalition. And then they kept on changing governments, but the problem wasn't the black cats or the white cats. It wasn't the color, it was that they were cats. And of course, then somebody said, well, why don't we elect mice? And they locked him up and called him a Bolshevik. But the point is, we need to change that. And a big part of the problem is the way that we vote. In the last election, 60% of the people who cast a ballot voted for somebody who didn't get elected. In my lifetime, and that's pretty long now, 35 years ago was the last time a federal government was won in the majority by a majority of the vote. That was Brian Mulroney in 1984. As a country, we end up voting against what we don't want more than voting for what we do want. But it doesn't have to be that way. An NDP government will bring in proportional representation. That means that it'll be less likely for our government to be a majority government in the future, and that's actually a good thing. You've heard different ideas from different people, and I'll be the first to admit that no one party has all the answers. I think it's really important. Wouldn't it be great if we could all work together? Different parties take the best ideas to do what's right for our country rather than living in silos. Then we could create a country where we don't have to choose between medication and rent, where people can get the training they need and not be in debt for decades, where people can have a place to call home for as long as they want to live there, where we acknowledge those who lived here before we did and ensure that they have equal place at the table when we make the decisions that affect everybody, where there are no more boil water advisories that go on for decades and decades and decades, and where politicians remember that they work for you, not the other way around. If you want to build a Canada like that, I urge you to support Jagmeet Singh and the NDP, and thank you. We are truly in it for you.
Thank you, Hal. Jane Philpott.
Thank you, and let me start by thanking each of you for your kind attention and for your focus on democracy by being here tonight. I also want to thank the organizers, the volunteers, and the sponsors, including the Stouffville Chamber of Commerce and the Whitchurch Stouffville Public Library, and a special shout out to Most Excellent Productions and also to Whistle Radio, who are here with us tonight, and our moderator, Jim Mason. What a great turnout. It's good to see you here. And I know that you're wondering about whether you can vote for an independent. Well, back in that election in 1984 that Hal just referred to, York South elected an independent candidate. His name was Tony Roman. Some of you might have voted for Tony Roman back in those days. But some of you have probably never voted for an independent candidate. Well, I say that a vote for an independent is an exercise in optimism. It's an expression of saying that politics can be better. In fact, politics should be better. And it has been a tremendous privilege to be your member of parliament over the past 4 years. I have to also thank my extraordinary staff who work in my constituency office here in Markham Stouffville, and I am so happy to know that every person that walks in there for help gets outstanding service, and I hope I will be able to continue to provide that to this community. Since April, when I became an independent member of parliament, when I was forced out of the Liberal caucus, I have had no shortage of opportunities to speak, to amend legislation and to improve it. I've had no shortage of media interest in my views as an independent member of parliament with policy expertise. And so if re-elected, I will support great legislation and good policies that are put forth by any party. And I will work to improve and change negative policies from any party and hold government to account. I will stand up for policies that are grounded in evidence and serve the best interests of all Canadians, and I will never be afraid to speak up on your behalf. Canadians know that politics can, in fact, must be done differently if we're going to tackle the most urgent problems facing our country and our planet. And so on October 21st, I hope you will consider sending a message to Ottawa. Let Ottawa know that Markham Stouffville is ready to color outside the party lines. It has been my tremendous privilege to serve this community in a variety of capacities over the past 21 years, and I hope that you will entrust me with the opportunity to serve as your strong, independent member of parliament. Merci beaucoup. Chimigwe.
Thank you, Jane. Helena Jazik.
Well, thank you all so very much for coming. And it has been an extremely informative evening. I do regret that the Conservative candidate was not able to attend, so that you would, in fact, have a full choice in front of you of the positions being espoused by each of the candidates here in Markham Stouffville. When I decided to put my name forward and seek the nomination as the Liberal candidate here in Markham Stouffville, it was because I was asked to do so by so many people. Many people acknowledge that we, in fact, are in a system, a party system. This is the way our parliament actually works. And many people said to me, the only way to get things done is to work through the current system. I am a very practical person. I like to get things done, and I think during the 10 years that I was the provincial member, I hope you noticed that I did do my very best to work hard on behalf of just about everybody in the riding. And so I have the greatest respect for Jane as a colleague and as someone who believes passionately in her community, and it was a very difficult decision for me to make. I was not only asked to run by so many people, but I also have been observing over the last year what's been happening in Ontario with the Conservative government. And there are so many cuts that have affected people. It has really spurred me on to see how the federal government, a Liberal government, can in fact assist people through these cuts with additional programs to address what has been really a devastating effect on so many people. And I believe that the Liberal platform will do that, and that's why I feel very strongly that we do need to elect a Liberal government in this country, and I would be honored to be your representative in that regard.
Thank you, Helena. Next, Roy Long.
Thank you. I'm a first-time candidate, and first of all, thank you, because you've been very kind. I've never spoken in front of so many people before, so thank you. I want to leave you with 3 thoughts. First, as a first-time candidate, I am shocked and appalled by how much money is in politics. When I see, I know I'm naive. When I see Andrew and Justin flying around in their private jets with their name on the side, and I go, all that money came from you and you and you and me. Most of the money through the tax credits. I'm shocked. So what I've done to be open and transparent about my finances is every day when I spend money on my campaign, I post it online. So you guys can see, not 6 months later, not a year later, but you can see my expenses online, and I'd love all the other candidates across the country to do that. So that's my first thought. The second thought is strategic voting. I think this is one of the enemies to democracy. The truth is, my one vote, or your one vote, is not going to win this election. No election in Canada has ever been won or lost by one single vote. The only way you can waste your vote is by letting the 2 big parties bully you into voting for them when you want to vote for someone else. If your heart is with the PPC or Jane or, heaven forbid, the Green Party, that's where you need to vote. Because if you love the PPC party but you vote for the Conservatives, you've wasted your vote. Your vote only matters if you vote with your heart. And the final thing is, climate change is one of the big issues today. Now, if you want a great steak, do you go to McDonald's? If you want a great pizza, do you go to Burger King? And if you want a great climate, do you go to any of these? No, you go to the real deal. You go to the Green Party. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. And last up, Jeremy Lin.
How do you top that? I need to hire him as my campaign manager. Anyway, I wanted to thank all of you guys for being patient with me. It is also my first time being in front of such a huge crowd, so I actually kind of froze up during the first 2 questions. I had more to say, but I didn't get a chance to say it because I was extremely nervous. But I guess I'm doing better than the Conservative because I'm here, right? So. Anyway, it's been a really honor and privilege for me to run this time. I've been around in Stouffville downtown, Markham downtown, talking to a lot of people. And despite the fact that there were a lot of people that didn't necessarily agree with my policies position, we were able to have good civilized conversation. So this is a testament to our country's democracy. I want to say again that, you know, we're not against anybody, but we do want to put our nation first. So we do believe Canada has fundamental values, such as equality between the sexes, the rule of law, equality of opportunity, and democracy. You're not ruled by despots like in other nations. You get to choose who it is that, you know, serve you in your riding and your community. I hope that those of you who have traditionally voted for a party because you've always voted for it will give other party a consideration, look up the platform. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I have my contact information, and I'm available to anybody who wants to ask me any question, because this format doesn't get to answer everything. Sometimes you need to have a much more longer and deeper conversation. So again, thank you everybody for coming out, and hope to see you guys around. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. If we were unable to get to your question, all the questions, the candidates will be here for a few more minutes. We encourage you to connect directly with them. I understand there are 2 more meetings similar to this next week in Markham on the 8th and 9th of October. I don't have the details. One is put on by the Markham Public Library. Another is in Cornell, I understand. Please talk to the teams for the candidates or look online for more information if you'd like to attend those meetings. Also, go to that Whistle Radio website, check for the podcast, listen for the rebroadcast, share that podcast with your friends and neighbors who were unable to make it here this evening. Also, look for stories in the local media. We've got local reporters on site here tonight who are recording photographs and stories from tonight's events. On behalf of the Whitchurch-Stouffville Public Library, the Whitchurch-Stouffville Chamber of Commerce, thank you to all the candidates for participating and to all of you for attending tonight. We hope that it has been informative. Please remember to vote on or before October 21st. Good night.